That's a great question. That's the mark. That's the kind of question that somebody should be doing podcast on. That's oh, you are doing a podcast. All right, good stuff, man. It's sorry, I was trying to make some little bit of levity there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dennis Semsey.
And I'm Sam Hornberger.
On this episode, we sat down and talked to a Christian photographer from the Jersey Shore. You are listening to the No Faith in Humanity podcast. The podcast about...
And suddenly, you can't help but fall in love with people again. Or, in my case, for the first time. And that's where I found Jesus.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of No Faith in Humanity. I'm practically speechless at this point. This episode that we have for you is just so incredible. I think it may be like the best episode that we have yet. I mean, I think I'm going to say that like every episode just because I get so excited after talking with the guests and everything. But really, truly, this episode is going to really blow your mind. It's going to give you all the feels. It's just so amazing. The guy that we talked to, Gregory, he's a longtime friend. He's an absolutely fantastic person in every single way. He has an incredible story to share, as well as just such a beautiful outlook on life and how to treat your fellow humans, how to view your fellow humans, how to love completely unconditionally. And I just think it's so important and it's so relevant for everything going on in the world today. And I really just want to just jump right into the episode because I'm so excited about it. But first, just some housekeeping stuff. Well, actually, I guess more PSA announcement stuff. This episode is broken up into 3 sections. Each section contains a chunk of interview followed by a further discussion Sam and I had about the topics that were brought up in that chunk of interview. You'll be able to tell when we're transitioning from interview into further discussion or further discussion back into interview because there'll be short musical interludes to separate them just so there's no confusion. Also, this episode does contain explicit language, so use discretion and maybe listen to this episode when you have a little bit more private time. Alright, Sam, lead us into this.
Okay, so we're going to be picking up the interview with Gregory explaining how he met his wife Mary. And that story entails some of the lowest moments of Gregory's life. And in those moments there was a lot of intense despair and intense emotion. And we just want to make sure that you aren't so put off by how low he gets that you don't stick around to hear how much the story changes, because it is an incredible story of change. And without further ado, Gregory?
Okay. All right. So then let's do this then. The way I met Mary was when I started when I was a little boy, growing up in New Jersey, and had a very violent, angry father who beat me and my sisters mercilessly for the slightest infractions, and drove terror into our hearts. And I would have profound anxiety attacks that would send me to the emergency room. By the time I was 8, I was drinking regularly. By the time I was 13, I tried taking my own life also when I was 13. I was also trying to take my life again when I was 17. I wound up in a rehab when I was a junior in high school for 30 days. Wound up trying to join the army to try to get myself straightened out, and was kicked out of the army a year later for drinking. Was fighting continuously alcoholism and homelessness throughout most of my 20s. I was a very desperate, very lonely, even though I was surrounded by a lot of people who would say they were my friends, but I still felt very lonely because they couldn't enter into my own perception of life, which was horribly distorted by my upbringing. Um, and I had no peace in my life whatsoever. I was just trying to find that peace. I would try dating different women, thinking that one of them would be the answer. I was in a punk band, and we played all over New Jersey. We played all over New York City. One of the highlights of my life was headlining at CBGB's. And but even with that, I still didn't find any peace, and I was still just go on blast with my alcohol and just still wind up sleeping on people's couches or in cars or in the woods or on the bridges. And at one point, finally, when I was 28, I was living in a house. It was a rooming house where crack addicts lived. That was one of my bottoms, and I was just completely. I remember I wrote a poem one night to God, and every single line in the poem was telling God to go fuck himself. Every single line in this poem. I hated God. I could not believe that this was my life. And 2 nights later, I was at a party for some friends who were who graduated from Rutgers because I was living in New Brunswick at the time. And I went outside to talk to some friends in the parking lot of this apartment complex. And there was a really bad car crash down the street and around the corner. And there were police sirens and everything. And I started going up the street to see what had happened, to see if everybody was okay. And the next thing I knew, while I was walking down the sidewalk, a huge, massively built man comes charging down the street. And he runs right past me, about 3 feet away from me. He's on the street, I'm on the sidewalk. He's flying past me. I turn to watch him go past me, and the next thing I know, I hear gunshots. And the next thing I do is I go running back to the house, screaming, call an ambulance, someone's been shot, and then I crash to the ground. When I come to, my head is hot, searing pain coming from the back of it. I'm sticky in my own blood all over me, and my head is in this young woman's lap, and she keeps telling me to squeeze her hands. And I realized I had been shot in the head. I'm laying there, and people are surrounding me, and they're crying, and people telling me, don't fall asleep, screaming at me, don't fall asleep. And I realize I'm going to die. I realize there's a bullet in the back of my head, and I'm bleeding to death. I have no family in my life. I have no friends in my life. I have nothing to show for my life. And if there is a God, I'm going to go to hell. That's how I was that night, laying there in the street, bleeding to death. The doctors did everything they could, and they saved my life at Robert Wood Johnson Hospital in New Brunswick. Every single one of them told me it was a miracle that I had lived. And I realized that it was the same God that I told to go fuck himself that spared my life. And I wanted to know who this God was. And I started searching. I started reading a lot of religious books. That is, a lot of them except for anything to do with Christianity, because I did not want to be one of those Jesus freaks at all. But I read about Confucianism. I read about Taoism. I read about Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. I read all these different religions. Now, while this is happening, I go to a Halloween party. And it was like one of those scenes where I walk in and I see this woman, young woman, she's on a couch talking to her friend. And like how in the movies when you see like the guy looking at the woman and like everything goes dark around that woman and she's like the only one who's lit and it's just like this tunnel vision, like him looking at her and like all the rest of the room falls away. Like that happened in real life. It was just me and her in this room. There was nobody else there, even though it was an insanely crowded college party. And I go over to her. And I remember the very first thing I asked her was, are you married? And she's like, what? She's just graduated from Rutgers. She's like, no. I'm like, excellent, because I want to meet you, And we just wound up talking that night. We literally talked for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it's kind of like that same thing. It was dawn coming up, and I'm walking her to her car, and we keep walking. I'm like, where's your car? She's like, oh, I'm going back home. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. She's like, no, it's fine. So I walk her as far as, whatever. And then I went back home myself, whatever. And, but one of the most important things that we talked about that night was the fact that she was a Christian. Now, she was a Christian who was smoking a cigarette and having wine, whatever, and I was intrigued. I was like, here's this beautiful, cool smoker who loved Jesus. I was like, tell me more about him. And we talked literally that entire night about Jesus. And she made him seem so awesome, was so different than anything I'd ever could have imagined. And I'll be honest with you, what I knew about Christianity was from my Catholic grandmother who clutched her rosaries all the time, and nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't for me, And but what she showed me was how relevant Jesus could be, and I really latched onto that, and that accelerated a process for me of me looking into who this Jesus is. And I still kept putting him off. And I remember that winter I would get these searing headaches. And I realized I could still die at any second. I have bullet fragments in my skull. There's no guarantee that I'm going to make it for too long. It's still less than a year after I got shot. I remember it came to a point where I was just like, God, I'm either in or I'm out, and I'm going for it. I want to know that I have a relationship with you, because that's all I want in the first place. Because my sister, who I had in my life at that time, Mary, who I was dating, were telling me about Jesus, and he sounded amazing. And the beautiful thing about Jesus was, all these other religions I was looking into were telling me that if I did all of these things well, all these steps, all these processes, then I can reach nirvana, I can find God, I can get closer to God. But the thing is I am a fuck up. I'm somebody who cannot put two steps in front of himself without stumbling on something. I was never the kind of person who could do processes well and succeed. I was not a successful person, and I knew that trying to pursue a religion where it was about processes and about taking the correct measures and steps, I would never find God. But then here was this Jesus whom I had discovered, who did it all for me. I don't have to do anything. He died on the cross. He took my sins, all of our sins upon him, died for our sins, so we can have this relationship with God. All I need to do is literally just love Jesus. I mean, how beautiful is that? By me loving this person, the Messiah, this Son of God, I immediately have a relationship with God. And then I follow his ways, and it transforms me from within. I can't do it. He does it for me. And I was in all the way. And so that is how I met my wife, because Mary and I, we dated for 2 years, and we wound up getting married in our third year. And we've been married now, this will be 16 years this May. So, and I've been a Christian for 18 years, 19 years. So, yeah, so that's how I met my wife. That's how I met Jesus. And also how I met you guys. So, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how you want to tackle this section. This section was a hell of a section. There's just like, it's almost like I almost just like want to just let it sit, which is just so incredible. But I'm gonna jump around because I'm actually gonna start at the end of his story that really struck me. He said, "The Jesus," this is not for verbatim. Basically, he said, "The Jesus whom I discovered," which he talked about how he was kind of exposed to Christianity. I think if you live in America, if you grow up in America, I think you have some exposure to a form of Christianity, because it's just everywhere. And he said that, his grandmother clutching the rosary beads and everything. But then he's like, this Jesus that I discovered, like, it's almost like you could be exposed to all this, but you're not actually discovering the person. You're not learning about the person.
Do you feel like you ever made any kind of personal discoveries, or do you feel like your life has mirrored what Gregory was talking about in any sense, where there were beliefs and stuff that were held, vibrant and were held dearly by others and expressed with vibrancy, but not held by you in a way that made you feel like you owned them yourself, perhaps? Or I'm not sure if Gregory felt like Jesus was off limits insofar as he saw his grandmother being a Catholic, but it was definitely out of touch. I guess, did you ever feel like Jesus was out of touch for you, or did you feel like he was imminent, I guess?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like he was out of touch for me. Like, I just feel like I think why it resonated so strongly with me is because I've been so, like, more so exposed than your average American, I think, to Christianity and to Jesus and everything. But I still feel like I haven't, like, discovered him.
I mean, you are, just kind of as a fact, like a post-church Christian. And well, I don't know. You're an agnostic now? But, I mean, at any point before you reached your current agnosticism, was he no longer out of touch? Like, did you have... I don't know. This is an idea I'm really having trouble articulating. Just the whole subject of being aware of something but not having felt like you really discovered it yet.
Yeah, I understand why it's confusing, because I feel like I should more than anyone else be able to say, like, I know Jesus. Like, I've definitely read enough of the Bible. I've definitely been to enough of Sunday schools and even read books on my own by different theologians and everything. But yeah, I truly believe, like, if discovering Jesus took a man who was angry and violent and addicted to alcohol, and he didn't really mention drugs, but I'm sure that he, used them at least recreationally, like, took this person and changed him into this person that I know now, who's, like, unbelievably loving of a person who just cares about people no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, just absolutely love them. If discovering Jesus does that to a person, no, then I have not discovered Jesus.
I think the discovering Jesus thing is more a type of experience than it is actually a discovery at all. And so, you experience Christianity insofar as you're exposed to it. And so if your exposure is lackluster, then I don't think you would call it a discovery of any sort. But when your experience changes and it becomes realer, and, Gregory is really he's telling the story of when things got real with religion, and the process of that and his growing relationship with Mary, and just thinking of all the things that are associated just with that time in his life. I think he had a lot of positive things going for him, just with meeting Mary, having recuperated from this brain incident, still being kind of at risk of potentially, dying because of it. He said he had bullet fragments in his skull. I'm not sure what that does or what kind of risk it poses, but I think it added a flavor of urgency to his life, probably. And being in the presence of such a hopeful, new environment compared to a crack house where you're writing, profane poems to God, to walking a lady home at night after having, spent a full day in discussion with her about Jesus. That's a new kind of stimulation that seeing a grandmother twisting over rosary beads just doesn't provide. And so I wonder if for you to discover Jesus, could it even happen in the same way that it happened for Gregory? If you met some girl that was really cool and loved Jesus, I don't think it would mean as much to you, simply because of the overexposure to Christianity that you describe yourself as having had. So I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, or if to discover Christ for you might entail something more significant, kind of like an intentional quest almost, like you know the lay of the land already just because of your upbringing, and so there's nothing new in the terrain of the Bible or in church that you don't really know is already there. But I'm not sure if during the times when you were participating in those things, I'm not sure if you felt your place in them while you were doing them. And I think the process of discovering Jesus might involve revisiting old frontiers as opposed to discovering a new one for you. Because I think you have a lot of room as a person to potentially look at those experiences and see them in a new light if you do have a kind of spiritual encounter that revitalizes you in the direction of Christianity. I think you would look at your past a little bit differently, because then you would be saying, oh, I'm a Christian now, and so these are all the things I've done as a Christian that have prepared me for this moment that I'm at now. But I'm not sure if when you get to the moment you would have said it's because you discovered something new. I think it might, or who knows, life is complex and it changes, but I certainly do think that the experiences you've had in the church and just in your Christian upbringing, kind of like the ones I have had, have my opinion on them has changed over time. And yeah, so it's an evolving history based on how I feel currently.
I don't know. Talking to Sam a little bit before this podcast, we were talking about how a person that we interviewed a while back, David, he was saying that he was really distraught about all the pain and suffering going on in the world. And I said, well, something that really caused me to really have a problem with Christianity was this idea that someone that's like wonderful and great, like David, who's a Muslim, well, now an agnostic, he could potentially go to hell. Yeah. Which I just couldn't accept or reconcile with. Right. I don't know. That's something that I deal with. Not so much suffering on a mass scale, which I know happens and is very upsetting, but it's more of the individual person.
This person in front of you, and you're like, how could God send this person to hell? And that's I totally understand that, and I also will forever wrestle with that. I don't have any answers for that. I don't, and all I can just say is that Jesus died for that person. That's all I know. That's the only thing I know. And after that, it's like, I don't know what else to say,
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, but he definitely did die for them. Yeah, I know Sam has some interesting opinions about hell and everything, because
just so you guys know, like, I'm not a person who's gonna like argue theology and stuff like that. Like, I just don't argue theology, because no one ever wins. No one ever does. And unfortunately, what can possibly happen is that people could lose some of the camaraderie they experienced before they started talking about it, some of the trust and some of the warmth that they had for each other, and it's not worth it to me, because it's like I've come to realize my mission on earth is not to change people. It's not to try to win them over to see things how I see them. My mission on this earth, is to get to know people, hear their stories, and love them no matter what, and let them experience the love of Christ that I have, and let that just funnel through me to them. One of the most important things I do, my calling card, my trademark, no matter who I talk to, I tell them I love them, and I give them a hug. And you should see the shock of some of these people when they share some of these things with me, and I tell them that, and then I give them the biggest hug. And I just had this guy just message me last week and was just like, you have no idea how much I needed that hug and how visceral that was for me. Thank you so much. Just to message me to thank me for hugging him. And that's my mission on earth.
Yeah.
That's it.
These are adults talking to each other, thanking each other for their hugs. I mean,
Yes, right.
yeah.
You guys believe in grace? You know what that is?
I do.
Grace is simply saying this: that even if I talk to somebody who I'm interviewing, they tell me how they hit their mother. Literally, I've interviewed somebody who told me they hit their mother and went to jail for it. Another person who told me that they were in jail and got out of jail, and now they have Megan's Law in place because of because of kids. Man, these are the kind of people that normally I would want to throw up and then spit on them, but Grace says, love them, give them a hug, and tell them you still love them. Even though everything that they did, you literally hate what they did, still love them. That's grace. That's grace, guys.
Mm-hmm. Greg, let me just so obviously you're an incredibly loving person. You adore people and you adore talking to people. Prior to your conversion to Christianity, like, were you that type of person as well? And Jesus just kind of enhanced, he kind of took away the hatred and the anger that you had, maybe resentment towards your father or just the way your life was. Did you take that all away and then just allowed who you actually were to flourish, or did God totally change you completely and like almost put in a whole new person within you?
It really is a great question though, because no, I was a fireball of hatred towards people that I just didn't agree with, or people that I felt slighted me, or people, whatever. It didn't matter. For whatever reason, if I didn't like you, you would know it. I would tell people to go kill themselves, like, routinely. Like, back in my punk rock, before Jesus, struggling with alcoholism and homelessness and arrogance and yet insecurity and feeling. The thing was, I felt so much less than everybody because of my dilemma in life that I had to put on this air of arrogance. I had to kind of like come across as like somebody who was better than everybody else, because I felt so inferior to everybody else, and it was just a big charade and big mirage, and but I was somebody who was dying inside. I was rotting inside, and so when I finally found that here I was, this rotten person, truly, how I treated a lot of people. Not everybody. Some people, if I got along with them, I loved them, but I just didn't even know what love really was. So it was still a very kind of dysfunctional love, because that's all I knew in my life growing up. But when I met Jesus, and Mary, I suddenly found what a healthy love, looked like. When I first started dating Mary, I would try to get into these like passionate, like fiery arguments with her, and she would just say, "Gregory, I'm not doing that with you. That's not how I was raised, and that's not how I argue. If you want to talk
So
to me,
you were trying to get her into these arguments at some points. You were like, okay, we need to solve something, and because it's a big thing, we handle it with big noises. So you were like, Mary, come on, let's go. And she's like, I know a better way.
I would fire like basically verbal grenades at her, and she would just be like, deflected. Now come on, calm down. Let's talk. You're an adult. I love you. You can trust me. Talk, And I was just blown away, like, because a lot of the women I dated before that, they were like a lot like me, and we were just like, we had these crazy fierce arguments, and then like we would finally calm down, and then we would like get into other stuff that I won't talk about, because I'm married and I'm Christian and stuff like that. But everything we did was passionate. And that's how I lived. If there was something that was missing, that was passionless in my life, then I dropped it. And Mary taught me that passion through kindness and respect and gentleness. Like, that's beautiful too. And I was just blown away, and I learned that through her and through reading the Bible. And there was nothing more passionate than Jesus' passion of following the pursuit of all of us, all the way to the across. He was so passionate for us. And yet he was so gentle and beautiful. And so, I won't say that I learned it overnight. I didn't. It took me years to finally get to a point. And I'll be honest with you guys. Um, I I would even, like, up until like 3 years ago, still get caught up in political debates and theological debates and all this crap because I thought it mattered. And it was just like all it would do is just like either get into these arguments with people, or it would find people getting like hurt, or I would get hurt. It just wasn't worth it. But this is something that's really important here. I also didn't really. I always wanted to be a pastor, and God kept closing doors to that left and right. I tried so many different ways, and it never worked out. But God has something waiting for me. I had no idea. So what ended up happening was, I was battling a depression. I was. This was 3 summers ago, and I started taking pictures of things that I saw that was beautiful on my iPhone, just to kind of signal that I still saw God, even in the midst of like this darkness. And I would share my pictures on Facebook. I never thought about photography before at all, and it was never anything that even occurred to me. But for some reason, the pictures that I shared on Facebook had an immediate and really like incredibly powerful reaction from a lot of my friends, like anything I'd ever seen before. And they were like, "We want more of these. These are incredible." And I was like, "All right," so I started doing more. And next thing I knew, I was just like, if anybody has a camera they're not using anymore, if you want to sell one, let me know. Well, next thing I knew, a week later, a UPS truck arrives at my house, and this box comes out. This brown box, not too big, bigger than a shoebox, but not too much bigger. And he's carrying it to my door, and I don't know why this occurred to me, but I was like, "That's my camera." I don't know why I thought that. It wasn't even on my radar. And I got the box, I opened it up, and there was this brand new DSLR Nikon D3200, and I'm looking at it, and tears are coming to my eyes. And you hear about moments where people are like, they discover something and that was going to change the rest of their lives. They knew it when they saw it. And I knew when I saw that camera, I knew that everything in my life was going to change right then and there. And it did. And what ended up happening was, I started this page called Portraits of the Jersey Shore. And suddenly, I'm talking to people. The second person I talked to, second interview I ever did, was a Muslim imam. And talking about a hot topic button thing for Christians. Holy cow, And I remember just like, there would always be so many arguments about like all this stuff with refugees and all this stuff, and you always hear about there's like the boogeymen, that a Muslim is supposed to be and stuff like that. But I was just like, I want to get to know people. Stop telling me who they are. I want to know who they are. I want to meet people now, and I just want to interview them and hear their stories. So I meet this man. He's got 4 kids, a wife, and I'm interviewing him, and I go, what is it that they live in Sayreville, New Jersey. I'm like, how do you want to raise your kids in Sayreville? And he doesn't even skip a beat. He goes, I want to raise my kids to be contributors to the community. He goes, I want people in the community to know that our kids are going to matter in the community, that they're going to make a difference, that they are going to contribute to it. And he goes, that's why I take them to Cub Scouts every week, because that's where the community is. And I want my boys to grow up in the community. I want them to know that we are part of the community. And I realized, like, this is a person, just like I'm a person, and just like you're people, and like we're all in this together. We're people, and if we can get away from like the memes and the themes and the bigger narratives, like what the news tries to feed us, or what Christians try to feed us, or what the left tries to feed us, or what the corporate right tries to feed us, or whatever. If we just get to know each other again, if we just stop this freaking freight train and just get off of it and just sit down and have a picnic with somebody and be like, so how are you? How's it going? What's important in your life right now? Suddenly we realize we're talking to real human beings and they have nothing to do with anything that you see on Facebook statuses or on news media or anywhere. They're people who have feelings and cares and concerns and brokenness and hope. And suddenly you can't help but fall in love with people again. Or in my case, for the first time. And that's where I found Jesus. Really found Jesus. It wasn't in the churches. It was in everyday people I met and hearing their stories. And I chopped away all of those the the constructs that the church put on me, all the expectations the church put on me that I'm supposed to go out and save people, I'm supposed to go out and change people for Jesus, and that all fell away. All I realized was that wasn't my mission. My mission was to have this camera and this platform to listen to people's stories and show them Jesus by loving them, regardless of what their story is. And that, my friends, is how I found how to love people. That is what it took.
Wow. So, the the story of the Portraits of the Jersey Shore. This has, I think, kind of like, most things, we know how trends work now, and we know that progress starts slow, and then it starts going faster and faster, and then it reaches a speed where it's moving, at, much faster than it ever has before. And I think that's kind of happening with your page, or at least it did. You might be a bit more stable now, but like I remember at one point you were doing an interview on the radio, and you were also going to, I believe, a shelter where might have been a food drive for the homeless or something, but you were speaking there about mental illness, perhaps.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about mental illness?
Mental illness. I mean, so that's such a broad topic. I mean, can you narrow it down a little bit?
Uh,
I would love to. I just want to make sure I'm hitting the right notes, though. So I can we're if this is like jazz, we still have to be in the same keys. So I just want to make sure I'm in the same key.
I
Well,
navigated
I'll
away.
put it this way. I think that
Mhm.
people are ashamed to say. I would say very generally, but very even specifically with people I talk to, it's an incredibly brave act when somebody shares with me that they battle with depression, because there is such a stigma attached to mental illness. I've interviewed people who are bipolar. I've interviewed people who battle with depression, anxiety. I've interviewed several people who have schizophrenia. In fact, last week I shared a feature on someone. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was a teenager, and he's been institutionalized. Just really just like marginalized by society, which was what for the longest time society's answer has been to mental illness, which is just we don't want to see or hear from you. You just go over there. We're gonna run society over here. Don't interfere with us because you're just gonna freak everybody out. But he said something really profound at the end. He said the one thing in life he wants to do more than anything else is to work or volunteer somewhere where he's helping people who have needs. And when I shared that on my page, just the responses just exploded with people who are just like, "Wow, like he's somebody who cares about people. He's not, he's a human being just like all of us. Like wow, and that's what I love to be able to do with my page is to blow up the stigmas, is to blow up the stereotypes and the fears and the presuppositions and all that stuff, and just get down to the what is it that makes you who you are, or what has shaped you, or what has been one of the saddest moments of your life, or one of the best moments of your life, and let us all enter into that with you. And when people share these things with me, first of all, it's very sacred, and I honor what they share with me, and I treat it with the utmost respect. And two, it is incredible how people respond to them. My page is it's 700 shy of 10,000 people, 10,000 followers, and the community that has been established on this page is one of the most incredibly compassionate, encouraging, just wonderful communities anybody could ever hope for. And regardless of what I share, people are going to go there with them, and they're still going to love them. And I'm so grateful that I have this platform for people to share where they are, regardless of their situation, and to be able to receive from people who may not understand what they're going through, but still love them. And it's incredible. And the reason why I'm able to do this with my page, the reason why I'm able to look, when I talk to somebody, within 30 seconds, I'll have people sharing with me some of the most intimate, penetrating facts of their life. People have shared things with me within minutes that they've told me they've never shared with anybody else before. And yet I get them to share with me. And why? People always ask me, how do you do it? The answer is because I've been there. Maybe not specifically what they're going through, but I've gone through depression so bad that I try to take my life. I've gone through alcoholism. I've gone through homelessness. I've gone through being beaten by my father so bad that I wanted to run away from home or try to take my own life. And I got abused by kids when I was going to grade school, and bad relationships, and I also gone through incredibly beautiful things in life, like my wife and my boys, and just being able to see a sunset with my eyes, and there's a lot of beauty out there too. But because of what I've gone through, though, but because of my trials, because of that, people for some reason can immediately tell that I'm not there just to gawk at them, but I'm there to enter into their life with them, and they sense that immediately, and they trust me. I can win a person's trust so fast, and it's because of God. It's because of what I've been through, and because of that, I have some profound stories to share with people, and they're sacred to me. But because of my depression, because of things I've gone through, there's times when people share things with me, and they're like, and they were told this to me before, and I'm like, you know what? It's okay. You're safe with me, and you're safe with this community. It's okay, and they trust me with it. So, yes, I have mental illness, and I'm not ashamed of it, and nobody should ever be ashamed of it, because the fact of the matter is, far more people have mental illness that are willing to let on. And if we all shared what is going on in our minds, what is going on in our hearts, I don't think we'll look at it as an illness anymore. I think we'll look at it as typical things that we all go through, and it won't have to be stigmatized anymore.
I feel like the theme for this entire podcast, at least this episode, and just this huge chunk of interview that we had, it can be just boiled down to love. And I don't know, I really resonate with that. He's just like Gregory said, love, he loves them no matter what. Even these people that, he said, one person beat his mother and went to jail and everything, but he loves them anyway, and he gives them a hug. And I don't know, I just think that's so beautiful. There's definitely not enough of that right now. Just people just loving each other, and not necessarily like condoning their behavior, or you're even like accepting it necessarily, but just loving them regardless. It's just all too often when you hear Christians, I just feel like everything's so divided in this country right now. It's like, I'm on this team, you're on that team, and anything that comes out of my team is correct, and I'm going to back it up no matter what it is. And I don't know, I just feel like it's this such black and white thinking that we've created, and we've just dug these trenches for ourselves. People aren't just reaching across, like grabbing at each other in like a loving sense, grabbing to hug, not grabbing like fighting, but like, to really just hug and just love on people. And I don't know, I just feel like we've become so divided, so bogged down by just the bureaucracy and the logistics of Christianity, especially. We just like lost the ability just to love people. It's like, isn't that like the number one commandment, is to like love one another? Isn't that like, and I don't know, I feel like we missed it. He's definitely living it out. So I feel like if Gregory told me I've never read a word of the Bible, I'd be like, well, you shine Christ more than someone who has memorized it, potentially, by your actions and the way that you're living,
Yeah, I think you talk about people digging themselves into trenches, and just thinking back to the days of trench warfare in World War I. the formidable aspect of trenches was not only being in the trench. It was that there was this horrendous divide between you and the enemy, and it was a divide that needed to be overcome in order for battles to be won. And so it makes, the trench a miserable place to be, because ultimately the more time you spend in the trench, those are days that weren't spent advancing, and I think in culture you see people holding ground in ideology and philosophy and in their own hurt. And now after Gregory's gone through this significant change, and he talks about being able to share love with people who had done horrendous things like beat their mom and gone to jail for it. That really is getting to see somebody who is in a sense, living life as if he were in this constant process of crawling out of his own trench and crossing over no man's land. Gregory is like a person that's always walking through the no man's land, and that's kind of what he does on the boardwalks of the Jersey Shore. Is he's like, that's to conjure up a strong and very powerful metaphor for something that's very harmless. It's a beautiful place. You'd never think of it as a battlefield, but it is truly it is a big thing to be able to love somebody that's beat their mother, and to actually be able to communicate a sincere love to that person, which Gregory is able to do. He has relationships with these people that are on this page because he did share his time with them and his full, presence. And he's a very welcoming presence. That's what we got in the interview, We spent 30 minutes with him before he even got to talking. He was just like, wanting to draw out our own stories, And, so going back to the metaphor of trenches that you brought up, Christianity, as any kind of system set up by man, serves to keep him in his own place to some degree, or it can. And the subversive activity that Gregory kind of talks about is just this act of loving and grace. That's kind of what grace is. It's the thing that keeps people in love with each other when there isn't a good reason to be in love with each other. That's kind of the activity of grace, and it's demonstrated so simply through Gregory.
I just want to make something really clear. I'm not attacking when I talk about division. I'm not bringing up any political party or anything. I think the left is guilty as well as the right is with these problems. I'm just so sick and tired of fighting about stuff with people. And it was like when he's talking about like debating political debates and like theological debates, and he's like, I'm not gonna engage in that. I'm not gonna do it. And like, I've been pretty fired up about what I believe in, and like some people will wear it as a badge, being like, I got conviction in my life. I'm a man of conviction. I'm a man that stands on principle and stuff. Yeah, integrity. But I don't know. I just felt like it just drew division in my friendships and even in my family. Like I was fighting with my dad about political stuff whenever, when things were happening, when, obviously everything that's been happening in the past 2 years or whatever. I'd really get, like, I remember like just really having a really, knockout, drag out fight with my father. Not like we didn't actually fight, but just like verbally when we were just arguing about things, and I was just wanting to pull my hair out that he couldn't see what I was saying. And it's just and it's just so stupid. It just is all fluff to keep us distracted from what's important, and that is just to love each other. And obviously my relationship with my father is totally fine. Like, we're great. I still disagree with him about political stuff, but it's more civil now. We're able to have nice discussion, and I try not to bring it up. I think sometimes he likes to tease me and stab me a little bit by like playing some like Trump thing or something, and just like kind of getting excited. I'm just like, but things are a lot better now. I don't know. It just, I just loved it. I almost wanted to cry because it's just so right on. He's just so right, and he's like everything that he was saying. I'm screaming from my heart.
So just so you know, my voice is starting to go. So I don't know if I have too much
Mm-hmm.
longer. It's like maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I just have another quick question for you, Greg. So you obviously you said that you had a lot of anger and everything built up towards people like your father and you said that you even told people to go kill themselves and everything. Did you ever like seek forgiveness after after your transition? Did you ever like kind of confront maybe even your father or anything, or just people that that you've wronged? Have you ever tried to go and reach out to them and ask?
Yeah, that's great, man. I'll be honest with you. As I came to know Jesus, absolutely, I went back there. And I went to people. I've written letters to people. I remember there was a landlord that I skipped out on that I owed money to. And I wrote him a letter and said, I just want you to know I came to Jesus. And here is, I just want you to know that, I'm not even sure if this is going to reach you, but I just want you to know I'm willing to pay the full rent that I skipped out on you for. Please let me know that you got this so I can send it to you. And, things like that. Like, I made amends everywhere I could. Absolutely. Because I realized that who I was not really who I am. Does that make sense to you? Who I was somebody that was covered with crap. And I just saw everything through a lens of crap, and I treated everybody like crap. But suddenly all that crap was washed away, and I saw who I really was, which is a child loved by God. And suddenly I loved everybody, and it was incredible, And I wanted to try to learn how to love people better. And one of the first things I did was, yes, go back to people and where forgiveness, where I felt like I should, even if some people were just like, oh, you don't have to say that, I felt like I needed to say that, But one of probably the most profound moments of forgiveness, not from me to somebody else, was rather from somebody else. Well, actually, no. Was when I was getting baptized. I was getting baptized in Atlantic Ocean at Ocean Grove, and my father came. I hadn't talked to him for 7 years at that point, because I hated him. But he came, and I was a new man in Christ now, and so I was glad he was there. But I didn't really know what to say to him. And I remember that we were walking back to our cars after I got baptized. We're talking. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this incredible, powerful, visceral emotion comes over me, and I just start bawling. And I just turned to my dad, and I said, Dad, I just want you to know that all that shit we went through, I said, I want you to know I forgive you. And then he started bawling. And then we just started hugging each other. We're bawling, two grown men, hugging and crying, hugging each other in the parking lot. And that's when our relationship started getting put back together again. And here we are now, 15 years later, and he is the father I've always wanted, and I'm the son that he always wanted. And we have an amazing relationship. Is it perfect? No. But it is healthy. And I love him, and I'm so grateful for him. So, yeah, forgiveness is very important in my life.
Damn. I actually, if you look, Dennis, like you could take a photograph to prove it, but I did start to tear up while you were talking just then. And like it has been that way this entire time. I mean, you're the real deal, and that's what people see. It's like, and I think that's really what people need to become. Everybody needs to become their own real deal, and that will, enable you to speak authentically to other people. Not like I'm taking an ideology and I'm, expressing it to you. It's I love you, and
Sam,
let's
I want
talk
to say
and
something
share
right
life.
there, because what you're saying is so important. If we can just we're all like, the three of us, we have incredibly active imaginations, right? We just have really sharp
Yeah.
imaginations. So can we just imagine that there's a God that loves us so much that he will stop at nothing to show it to us, but maybe the way he shows it to us is by allowing us to love others. Does that make sense? Because if I'm so self-absorbed like I was before I knew Jesus, that all I can think about is like how I can experience the love of others towards me, but suddenly I'm experiencing or believing that there's a God who loves me so much that he wants me to show other people love. Maybe then I could start understanding what this whole thing is about. So it's like if we could all just imagine that there's a God who loves us so much that he wants to give it to us, but then he wants us to go out and show it to others. It's profound what can happen, but we have to have that imagination to perceive that and to go out there and be like, I'm not looking for anything from anyone. I'm looking to give to someone, you know. And then that's where the transformation happens. And that's all I can share with you guys tonight.
Alright, that's going to do it for us for this episode of No Faith in Humanity. Thank you all so much for listening. We sat down to record a third further discussion, but after talking about it for a while, Sam and I both agreed that it would be just best to leave it with Gregory's words, just because they were so powerful. Make sure to go and like Gregory's Facebook page, Portraits of the Jersey Shore. He is doing really incredible stuff, and you do not want to miss out on any of it. We will put a link in the description of this podcast, as well as post it up on our Facebook page, the No Faith in Humanity podcast. That's where you can find us on Facebook. And we'll also post a link to a 7-minute video about Portraits of the Jersey Shore that you can watch, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go and watch it. Make sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast, because we don't want you to miss any episodes. We will be releasing some mini-sodes from this episode in the next coming weeks, and you definitely do not want to miss that. You can also email us at nfih.podcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you could just take a second of your time and go on to iTunes or Facebook or Google Play and just give us a rating, that would help us a lot, preferably a good rating. That's definitely something that we'd want. And until next time, stay safe and peace be with you.